He wasn't the loudest in the room, nor the flashiest. Calvin was the type of person who lingered at the edges of conversations, observing, waiting for the right moment to drop a perfectly timed quip. But wit alone doesn't pay the bills, and Calvin, a recent college graduate, was finding that out the hard way. "Calvin, maybe it's time to get serious," his roommate said one afternoon, watching Calvin pace their tiny apartment in Los Angeles. "I am serious," Calvin shot back. "I'm seriously trying to make people laugh for a living." The roommate chuckled, shaking his head. "Well, you might want to try a serious paycheck first." Calvin had heard it all before. Growing up in a tight-knit academic family, his pursuit of comedy wasn't exactly what his parents had envisioned. They wanted him to aim for a respectable career, not one involving late nights and rejection. But Calvin's love for humor was irresistible. He spent hours performing in improv groups, sharpening his quick thinking and comedic timing. His work was clever, but clever didn't always translate to success. After a few months of sending out resumes, Calvin landed a job writing for Asterisk, not necessarily the news Asterisk on HBO. It wasn't glamorous, and the jokes he wrote often ended up in the trash. But Calvin didn't care. "At least I'm in the room," he told himself. One evening, while brainstorming a skit, a producer glanced at Calvin's notebook. "This is weird," he said, holding up a hastily sketched joke about absurd courtroom antics. "Weird can be funny," Calvin said with a grin. The producer shook his head. "Not for this show. Too niche. Try something broader." The rejection stung, but Calvin didn't quit. He kept honing his craft, developing a voice that was uniquely his. Eventually, the HBO gig dried up, leaving him adrift. With little money and even less direction, Calvin packed his bags and returned to the East Coast. "Back so soon?" his mother asked when he arrived home. "Just regrouping," Calvin replied. "I'll figure it out." His break came unexpectedly. Through a friend of a friend, Calvin learned about a position on Asterisk, Saturday Night Live Asterisk. He sent in his samples, a mix of sharp, irreverent sketches, and crossed his fingers. Weeks later, the phone rang. "Is this Calvin speaking?" "This is Lorne Michaels' office. We'd like you to come in for an interview." The interview was nerve-wracking, and Calvin second-guessed every word he said, but his sketches did the talking for him. A few weeks later, he was hired as a writer on SNL. Calvin thrived in the chaotic environment. The relentless pace, the late-night brainstorming sessions, the pressure to deliver, it was exactly what he needed to hone his skills. "You've got something," a senior writer told him one night. "A mix of sharp and silly. Keep at it." Calvin did. Over time, he became known for his distinctive humor and ability to craft sketches that balanced absurdity with cleverness. But it wasn't until years later, when he stepped in front of the camera, that the world would recognize his true genius. Because you see, Calvin wasn't his real name. It was just a placeholder for a lanky redhead who turned struggles into laughter. Today, the world knows him as Conan O'Brien, the writer, comedian, and late-night host who persevered until his humor finally found its stage. And now you know the rest of the story.